Hi, I'm really excited to take on the challenge of quilting my squared away quilt block without using a single stitch of ribbon candy. I want the same effect of quilted versus unquilted areas, so I've basted together this little sample block using wool batting. I spray it together with the Sullivan's basting spray, nice and sticky, holds it together while I'm quilting, so that the parts I've quilted will stitch down and the parts I haven't quilted will stay up, will puff up because of the batting. You've noticed on the block that I've marked it. I actually made, hold on, a 1.5 inch stencil with Golden Threads paper, and I've marked it with a pounce pad. If you go to my blog, I'll show you a link on how to do this, or I actually discuss this in my Craftsy class, Free Motion Machine Quilting. It's on my website. So I've marked this, and the reason I've done it, and they're marked in 1.5 inch squares, is so that I'm going to put a swirl inside of each of those blocks so that the quilting is evenly distributed. I'm going to quilt this, this is going to be a placemat, so I'm actually going to quilt it to be usable, and I'm using yellow thread, Fabulux Mellow Yellows. Let me get started. I've brought up my bobbin thread and I'm ready to quilt a swirl in this center yellow square. You might notice I'm using a different machine than I normally use. This is my new Handy Quilter Stitch 710 and it quilts like a dream. So this is a home sewing machine that I'm using. I'm going to do a swirl. I'm going to go clockwise. Try to fill this square with as much of the swirl as possible. Let me take that a little faster. There's a slider bar for the speed. There we go. So that went all the way into the center and was a little fast. So turn it back down. Trim my tails while I'm here. And come back out and retrace it. I'm not worried about retracing it perfectly. I just want to fill the area and make it a quick ending knot. I'll bring up my bobbin thread. I'm going to do needle down, needle up, and pull up my bobbin thread. I've finished this swirl in the center square. Now I'm going to put swirls in each of the blocks going around. I've started in the middle of one side of a block and I'm going to quilt to the right. I'm going to quilt up and over, and I'm just trying this out. I don't really have a plan for this. I haven't drawn it out ahead of time. This is a placemat. It's going to have spaghetti spilled on it, so it's not show worthy here. Retrace that swirl just like I did in the center. Play with that speed a little more. I did mention it's a new machine. I'm going to go up and over because I want my thread, my needle, to be toward the next swirl. Let me trim these tails. And now I'm going to put a swirl in this next block. What I'm going to do is stitch it upside down. So I'm going to go under it first. This helps me keep it rounder. And retrace it back. Again, perfect retracing isn't something I even try for. And I've retraced it back to where they join. And I'm now going to retrace it a third time here toward the beginning. Toward the front end, so I can begin my next square. Let me do another. And retrace it back to where that swirl began. And over. And now I'm in a corner. So I'm going to stitch all the way in and all the way back out like I have been doing, but I need to end with my needle on the top of that square so I can go up the right side. So that one was over. This one's going to go under. I'm trying to fill that square the best I can. Back to the beginning here. And instead of stitching to this far right side, a half circle like I have been doing, which will put me into my green square, I have stitched all the way up to the top, which is going to start my next spiral. I'm going to stitch around this one in the opposite direction again. And all the way back to the beginning, up and over, so that my needle is ready to stitch the next square. Go here. It's so weird quilting this quilt without any ribbon candy. And to the beginning of the next one. Around again. Back to the beginning. And up to start the next corner. I don't really care how perfectly round these are. I'm just looking to fill the space. I want the yellow quilted down and the lime green up, unquilted. I'm going to let the batting pop it. So there I went around 3/4 of that circle to get my needle to where I need to start the next square. Go in the opposite direction. To the beginning, and move it now to the beginning of the next one. Up and over. All the way back to the beginning of that swirl, and the beginning of the next one. I really like this yellow thread on here. It's several shades of bright yellow, so it's blending well, but it gives it a little bit of richness and depth. Go all the way back, forward, and now one in this corner square. You can see my marking there wasn't perfectly in the corner of the square of the fabric, and I don't really care because the marking is going to go away. It's just a guideline to help me space them out around to the beginning of the next one, which is about 3/4 of a circle. Opposite direction. Back to the beginning. Here. 3 more to go. Go around this one in the opposite direction. We're almost done. I need to pause. I think my foot is coming off. There we go. It was wiggling a little bit. Get a screwdriver and tighten that up later. The problem when you have arthritis, you can't finger tighten screws very well. And now I'm going to do my last one. Fill in that swirl all the way back to the beginning of the swirl and end where I started. I'm going to make a knot here and I'll show you what's up next. Well, I finished all my swirls and it fills the space, and I was able to quilt a block without using any ribbon candy. I still like ribbon candy better, and I'm going to show you why. Can you see the puffiness on here? That where this green is puffing up because of the wool batting, this part of the yellow is also puffing up here. And when I do ribbon candy, I end up stitching all the way to the edges. And I think that accidentally takes care of the stitch in the ditch to give this a really crisp line. So I think I need to stitch each of these in the ditch. I could go and get a thinner thread, which is what I'll probably do on my real quilt, my actual throw size squared away quilt. But here it's a test, it's a placemat. I'm going to use the same yellow thread I just stitched with. Let me set that up. So this is exciting. I changed the foot on my machine. This is a ruler foot that's going to let me use long arm quilting rulers against the foot of my Handy Quilter Stitch machine. What I'm going to use is, this is a mini scallop ruler. It has a straight edge here, and it has some cutouts on the side, which really are going to make stitch in the ditch easy. I'm not using my walking foot, and I'll show you why I prefer this. So there are little lines. There's a tab sticking out here in the bottom of the ruler, and there's a line 1/4 inch in right here. And what I'm doing is putting that on the seam line when my needle is in this ditch where I want to stitch, and my line here is in an extrapolation of the ditch, that same line down here. My ruler is going to go straight, guiding the foot so that my needle goes straight in the ditch. Now I have ruler grip under here to help me push the fabric. I'm pushing the fabric with one hand over here, and I need to hold the ruler kind of attached to the quilt here. This is Handy Grip, it's really good stuff. And I'm simply going to start stitching and push the foot along the edge of the ruler. Let me trim my tails while I'm here. Now here's why I'm not using my stitch in the ditch, my walking foot, sorry. I'm doing the same trick here, but I don't have to turn the quilt. A walking foot only goes in one direction. Here, I can kind of push the quilt, get that straight line without my walking foot. I'm going to do the same thing here. Use the little line-up line. There I am in the corner, and I'll do the fourth side. And I did that all without rotating my quilt. A little placemat like this, it's not a problem to simply flip it around. But once I do my throw size quilt, I think it's 55 by 63, something like that. That's a lot of material to move in a smaller machine. So here I can orient it once and keep quilting. And I've stitched in the ditch all the way around here. I'm going to finish stitching in the ditch and show you what a difference that makes in the block. I'll be back. I finished all of the stitch in the ditch around and inside each of the yellow strips. So I stitched around this square, around here, and around the outside. I also stitched around the outside of the square, setting off this sashing that I have to make a placemat, and I stitched on the other side of this checkerboard to hold that down. It was an extra step, but I think it really made a big difference. Can you see how much better this is puffing up here in a nice straight line instead of all the fullness moving all the way around? So stitch in the ditch is the key. I probably wouldn't do it with this 40 weight polyester with the Fabulux. Whenever I go to do it on my quilt, I'm probably going to use this Invisafill. It's a 100 weight polyester, and it's going to make a really it's going to add the texture, it's going to give the definition, but you're not going to see the thread stitch sticking out like you do on my quilt here, on my placemat. So since this is a placemat, I want to show you how I quilted the rest of it. Let's make those decisions next. I've decided I want to stitch continuous curve around this checkerboard strip on the placemat. I could go and do that freehand, that works really well, but since I have the ruler foot on, and I love the accuracy of rulers, I pulled out an oval template. This is Handy Quilter Oval Set C number 2. And I have my needle 1/4 inch in from the end of my quilt. It's really important when you're working on a project and working on the outer edges that you don't quilt your design all the way to the end of the fabric, because you'll end up binding over the design. I actually use that 1/4 inch tape, the 1/4 inch tape we used to use for hand quilting. I go through oodles of that to give myself that visible barrier at the end of my quilt if I can't remember to do it. The ruler foot actually helps me do that because it sticks out a good bit. And what I'm going to do is put the end of this ruler that has ruler grip here against my foot, and I'm holding it perfectly horizontal because this is an oval, and if it's tilted a little bit, the curve isn't going to be the same. I'm choosing an oval instead of a circle because this is only a 1.5 inch finished square, and that much of a circle edge is going to be pretty flat. An oval will give me a deeper curve at the end. So what I'm doing is my needle is here, but my eye is looking back here. I'm not sure if you can see that with the camera, but I am not putting the edge of the ruler right on the intersection of the seams. I'm putting it a 1/4 inch away so that my foot will stay on the ruler, but my needle will hit the point of the intersection. Let's see if that works. There we go. That was sweet. Really, really accurate. And now I'm going to turn this so that I can do the curve going across the back. And go here. And flip it upside down. If your freehand continuous curves aren't what you want them to be, they're not as accurate as you'd like. This adds tons of accuracy. I'm going to go up this one and across. Keep on going. It's really weird for me to be quilting without having a book in my ears. I wear headphones while I'm quilting, and I can catch up on all of my reading while I'm quilting. It's a really fun time to just sit here and read the latest book and move the ruler from position to position and fill in the quilting area. I have my squeaky chair set a little high here, so I'm struggling to see under the machine. I need to put my chair a little lower and get one that doesn't squeak so much. There we go. I think I only have like 3 more squares to go. I'm using yellow all through this because it's reading as a neutral, even though it's stitching on all of these different colored squares. And again, this is going to be a placemat. Somebody is going to eat spaghetti on here. So I'm using this as a pattern test before I make all of these decisions on a big quilt and then decide I don't like it. I often take a little bit of leftover fabric, make a sample of the quilt I'm about to quilt, and test it out. Placemat, pillow, small tote bag, mug rug, anything like that. So I can make my quilting decisions and know what I'm getting myself into. And here, I'm angling this to be sure that my foot clears in the back without me stitching all the way into my binding area. Again, if you can't see that, use that handy dandy 1/4 inch tape. Still have tons of that left over. I used to be a hand quilter before I discovered machine quilting. So now that I've done all the horizontal lines here, I'm going to do this vertical line. Sorry about that. Down. 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 Again, being careful not to stitch into my binding area. There we go. And back up that whole way. Oh, let me move my fabric gripper over. If you can hear that cat, that is Kermit. He wants to sing you the song of his people. He's nearly 20 years old, so he can be as annoying as he wants to be. He is family. So now I've stitched all the way up and down. I'm going to come across the top again. Making sure I don't stitch into my binding. And come back down again. Almost done. I'm taking my foot off and on the pedal each and every time. I don't like to leave the needle running while I'm moving the template. Just in case something happens. I don't want to clip the ruler with the needle accidentally. So, no moving parts next to moving parts. Again, avoiding stitching in the seam allowance down here. Stitch across. And finish. I was really pleased with this space. I had that big template all the way inside the machine. There's a nice opening here. While I still have my thread attached, I'm going to stitch, there's a little panel on the side here just to make the placemat rectangular. So I'm going to stitch some little swirly feathers up here since I have swirls going on in the rest of the quilt. Let me grab another template. This is Handy Quilter Wave Ruler F. And I do not really care where it lines up. Again, placemat, spaghetti sauce. This is not going to last forever here. So I stitched over to kind of the middle. And I am lining up these vertical markings on my seam line here, which is going to help me keep that. Now, I've stitched past my fingers here, which is getting a little dangerous. So I'm moving my fingers up. You don't want to quilt with your ruler unsupported. Once I get to the end, just move it up. So I just made a wavy spine to put a feather on. Let me quickly stitch down to the bottom. It'll be easier for you to see in the camera. So I'm going to take that swirl and put it on the spine. And retrace it back in. And out. And back in. And out. And back in. And I'm making these swirls any size I want because it's my quilt. Placemat. The pressure's off because it's going to get gravy on it at some point at somebody's house. And keep working these swirls all the way up. I'm going to continue quilting off camera and come back and show you this when it's all done. I've finished my feather all the way up. I'm pretty happy with it. But since I did it uneven and I really like that look, I'm good with it. But again, I'm not tickled with the puff sticking out right next to the feather. So I want to fill this puff in a bit here and hold it down. I really like to play with the quilted areas versus the unquilted areas, especially when I'm using batting that has some loft. So let me come down here, needle down, pull up my bobbin thread. Let's try that again. And pull up the bobbin thread. There it is. Now I'm going to use the edge of my foot here, a couple quick stitches, and run the edge of my foot on the outside of the feather and work my way around. Just a quick echo. And I can come back in and fill in the next echo and stitch up to the next unquilted area. And a quick echo in here. And here I've got a lot of extra fabric. A little bit of a pucker. Let's work that in a bit. There we go. And that can work out on the next. Another echo. There we go. And finish up here. So I've now echoed all of that. I'm ready to take it off and bind it. Let me show you the whole thing. Here's my entire placemat ready for binding. I have a second placemat. I'm going to quilt the same way. And now I'm going to take what I learned from this and quilt my entire squared away quilt. If you liked this video and want more, you can follow me on DebbieBrownQuilts.com, sign up for my newsletter. And also I have some craftsy classes you can sign up for if you want more free motion quilting lessons. Happy quilting!